Introduction to the GCH Guitar Academy Fingerpicking Guitar Course. This introduction is really aimed at absolute beginners. However, some guitarists with slightly more experience might find the material in this lesson useful. And we'll look at how to speed up your chord changes so they're smoother when you're attempting to fingerpick. And secondly, how to read tablature, which is absolutely essential to learning how to play fingerstyle guitar. If you're fairly confident with your chord changes and you can already read tablature, then you can skip on to lesson 1 of the fingerpicking course, and you'll find the link to that down below in the description. With this lesson, in order to practice what you'll be learning, you might need to have access to the eBooks. So for this particular lesson, I've made the eBooks free, and you'll find those at www.ebooksforguitar.com, and there you can view this ebook online for free. And for this particular lesson, you can download it to your computer in PDF format, so you can view it there and print it out if you need to. And whilst I'm talking about the content of the website, it's worth pointing out, if you go back to the lessons and then click on chords, there's an interactive chord chart there. And if you click on the chord, it will take you to a detailed lesson on that specific chord, so it'll show you how to play it properly. Right, let's get on with the lessons then. Lesson 1, speeding up chord changes. Each of these exercises has been specifically written to teach you a particular technique that can help you speed up your chord changes. So just go through them all, because there's only 5, and then we'll recap the techniques at the end. Exercise 1. This exercise includes the chords C, A minor and G7. If you can't already play these chords, it's worth going back and learning how to play them. Again, I'll refer you back to the website where you can just click on the chord and you'll get the lesson on how to play it. So, the first chord we're going to play is a C major chord. Now, once you've got that chord down and you've played it pretty cleanly, you then want to leave all the fingers in place except the 3rd finger. And you remove the 3rd finger from the 3rd fret of the A string and move it across to the 2nd fret of the G string. So you've not moved the other 2 fingers, only the 3rd finger. And then you can move it back to the C again by removing it from the 2nd fret of the G string and putting it back in the 3rd fret of the A string. Now just repeat this a few times back and forwards between the 2 chords. Once you're pretty comfortable going between the C and the A minor, we'll now try another chord. And this one's a little more difficult. So we go back to the C first of all. But this time we remove the bottom 2 strings, maintaining the pattern, and move them down a string so that they're no longer on the A string and the D string, but they're on the E string and the A string. And we also remove the 1st finger from the B string to the E string. So in effect, we're just exploding the fingers out from the middle, but still maintaining an approximate idea of the shape. Now, this new chord is a G7. This is a little more difficult and will take a little more practice, but just try going between the C and the G7 and the C and the G7. With the 2nd and the 3rd finger, if at all possible, you want to try and maintain the shape. This will help you speed up the chord change. So go between the C and the G7 whilst trying to maintain the shape of the 2nd and the 3rd finger. Once you feel fairly confident with the chord changes you've done, try bringing the whole chord exercise together. Firstly, just try playing it as it is a few times until you feel comfortable with that, and then try playing it with a metronome. You can get a metronome free online or off your mobile phone, and it'll just help you keep time accurately. Even if you think you can keep accurate time, the chances are you won't be able to whilst you're trying to concentrate on the chord changes. So it's well worth downloading one so that you can get used to playing in accurate time. So here's exercise 1 being played at a nice slow 60 beats per minute. Exercise 2. This exercise involves C major, A minor and E minor. The first half of this exercise should be pretty easy by now because it's just going between the C major and the A minor as you did with the previous exercise. However, this time you'll have to go between the A minor and an E minor. Again, you'll notice there is a slight similarity in the pattern in that you remove the first finger and then move the second and the third finger down a string, keeping them together. Therefore, this should simplify the chord changes. So try practicing first going between A minor and E minor, back to A minor and E minor, and so on, until you feel comfortable with the chord change. Once you feel you can do the chord changes reasonably well, you can try playing the entire chord exercise. And then when you feel comfortable with that, you can try playing it with the metronome again. Here's the exercise played at 60 beats per minute. Exercise 3, and this exercise involves playing a C major and an F major. You're probably looking at this exercise and thinking, wow, that's easy. Well, I'm afraid it's not. The F major is probably one of the hardest chords you'll learn when you first start learning the guitar. So this exercise is actually really difficult. However, you'll notice there is a similarity in the way the fingers are laid out between the F and the C major. So if you can maintain the pattern of the second and third fingers and move them up a string, and then roll your first finger across to cover the two strings, you should get the F okay. However, don't worry if you can't play the F straight away. It may take some practice. You will get it eventually if you stick with it. Here's this exercise being played at 60 beats per minute. Exercise 4. And in this exercise we use E minor, A major, D major and G major. This chord exercise really demonstrates that sometimes you can come across chord changes where there's very little in common with the fingering or the shapes of the fingering. And therefore you just have to practice going between the chords regardlessly and try and speed them up. For the first two chords we have an E minor and an A major. And this does have a common factor, and that is the first and the second fingers being close together. If you can maintain that shape, it can help you speed up the chord change. So you play the E minor and then move the first and second finger across by a string and add the third finger to create the A. Now, try going between the E minor and the A major and the E minor and the A major. Once you're happy with this chord change, you can move on to try the A major to the D major. Again, there's very little in common with these two chords. However, you'll notice the third finger is on the same string in both chords. Therefore, you may find it easier to slide the third finger up by a fret and then add the other two. This might actually make it harder for some people, but with others they'll make it easier. So work out the best way for you and practice going between the A major and the D major and the A major and the D major until you're comfortable with the chord change. Once you're happy with all the chord changes, you can try putting the entire chord exercise together. Then you can try playing it with the metronome. Here it is being played at 60 beats per minute. Exercise 5. And this exercise has a C major and a G major. With this exercise, we want to demonstrate the fact that sometimes it's a good idea to break the rules. Here, if you play a C major and then play a G major with the conventional fingering, you'll find every finger has to move quite radically across the guitar. Therefore, if you've got a tune that has a lot of rapid changes between these two chords, it becomes very difficult to play. However, if you maintain the shape of the C, i.e. move the second and the third finger down a string, and then use the little finger on the top E string, the amount of movement the fingers have to do is considerably less, and therefore it's a far easier change to do. So, using this fingering, try going between the C major and the G major, back to the C major and the G major. Right, Let's hear and see that exercise done with a metronome at 60 beats per minute. Just as a point of interest, as we've touched on alternative ways of fingering chords, here I've got some examples of using one finger to cover two strings. This is most commonly done on the chords of E major and E minor, and A major and A minor. Now, this technique isn't for everyone, as you need to have a little width in the end of your fingers. However, if you do have a little width in the end of the fingers, you might find this technique quite useful. And I've taught students in the past whose fingers have been very broad and they overlap onto strings they shouldn't be touching. So using one finger across two strings is really helpful if you've got fingers like that. Right, I'll demonstrate how these chords are played. Right, let's list the tips that'll help you speed up your chord changes. Tip 1 is to look for pivot fingers and use them. And a pivot finger is a finger that can stay in place between both chords, so it doesn't move. Obviously, if you can leave a finger in place, that will speed up the chord change quite a lot. But if you were to lift a finger and then put it back in the same place, you're obviously creating unnecessary movement and slowing yourself down. Tip 2 is to look for common patterns in the fingering of the chords you're moving between. Because if there's a common pattern, you can just lift it from one chord and move it to the next chord without changing the fingers too much. And this can speed up the chord change quite a lot. Tip 3. Don't be afraid to change the recommended fingering. It is, after all, only recommended and not a law. So if you find it easier to get between two chords fingering a chord differently, then do that. And when fingerpicking a chord, if you're not actually playing a note, then there's no need to put the finger down. Tip 4 is really important for fingerpicking, and it's when you play the chord, you try to get the first note you're going to play down first. And this might be awkward for some people, because if you've got used to putting your fingers down, say first, second, third finger, you might have to put the third finger down first because it'll be the bass note. But this can speed up the chord changes remarkably. Tip 5 is just as important for experienced guitarists as it is for beginners, and that is practice with a metronome wherever you can, and this will help you maintain a constant and accurate beat. And you'll find this really useful if you ever get the opportunity to play with a band or with other musicians, because you'll be able to stay with the rhythm. Tip 6 is probably the most important tip, and that is to keep practicing. If you can't play something, just keep practicing. Even if it takes you a couple of weeks or a couple of months to learn to play something, don't worry. Once you've got it for life. And what other channels say about learning the guitar in weeks or months is rubbish. It takes time to learn the guitar properly. Before we move on to how to read tablature, you might want to take a break and practice what you've learnt so far. And if you want to practice with some metronome beats, I've put some metronome beats at the end of this video at 60 beats per minute, 80 beats per minute and 100 beats per minute. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next lesson now, which is how to read tablature. Tablature is exactly the same whether you play acoustic guitar or electric guitar. The stave for tablature consists of 6 lines representing the strings of your guitar. The bottom line represents the thickest string or the bottom E string, and the top line represents the thinnest string or the top E string. And obviously the other lines represent the strings in between in order. The fingering positions are represented by numbers on the line. So, for example, a 2 on the second line from the bottom would represent the 2nd fret on the A string, or a number 3 on the second line from the top would be the 3rd fret on the B string, and a 0 on the top line would represent an open top E string. You should read tablature from left to right in the way you read conventional music or the way you read normal text in a book. So if you see a column of numbers on top of one another, then this is a chord being strummed. However, it's usually marked with the name of the chord above it to make life easier. In order to read tablature, it really takes practice. But in order to check you understand what you've learnt, here's a very simple tune, which is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And the reason I've chosen this one is because most people around the world know it. And it's very simple, so you should be able to hear any mistakes you make. But just in case you think you don't know it, here it is being played. And here that is again. This tablature is included in the free ebook that I've made available at ebooks4guitar.com, as well as the previous chord exercises you practiced, and a couple more very simple tablature reading exercises just so you could practice reading the tablature. Now you're probably thinking this lesson's a little scant on detail, and that's because I want you to download the tablature and practice reading it yourself. If I show you in close detail how to play the exercises, the chances are you'll just copy me or do it by ear. Whereas if you've just got the tablature, you'll be more likely to try and work out how to read it. Once you feel fairly comfortable with the tablature, you can then move on to lesson 1 of the fingerpicking course. And I'll put the link to the playlist for that course down below in the description, as well as the link to lesson 1. And if you want to see more lessons, please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified when I upload new lessons. Thank you very much for watching, and here's some metronome beats to practice with if you need them.